Hello, everybody. I am so glad to be with you here today. My name is Jacob. I am an outreach technician at Ann Arbor District Library, and I am joined today by some of my colleagues, some of my fellow staff members here at Ann Arbor District Library, and we are here to discuss the big gay read. It's called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire. So, as I said, I'm very excited to be here with you. How I kind of like to start this thing is if you could show me with your thumbs. Maybe you got one thumb up, maybe you got one thumb down, maybe you got two thumbs up, two thumbs down. I would like to know from you guys how much or how little you enjoyed reading this particular book. Show me with your thumbs. I'm seeing thumbs. I'm giving it this. Okay, that is good to know. Not even a half thumb down, not even a middle thumb. Okay.
That I do like.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about why our thumbs are doing what they're doing. Before we get there, this first question I have for you is, before the book even begins, right? It says, this book is dedicated to all the boys who play by different rules. What is he talking about? What are these different rules? Rules are discussed a lot throughout the book. What is he talking about?
I got the sense it was just people that are different, that aren't exactly the same as everybody else, that feel different.
Yeah.
In any way.
I think Ari sort of references, there's a lot of times where he says, like, he talks about himself in terms of like what he expects masculinity to be like. And there's a lot of conversations that come up around that, like boys don't do that, but, you know, and so I think maybe it's in reference to that as well. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to play by that certain set of rules. Yeah.
I agree with Lucy. I interpret it as like gender norms. Just because like Dante comes and like turns his world upside down, because Dante is like this like just sweet boy, you know. Yeah. And it's like nothing that Ari's used to.
But
and I also think, no, please.
I was just thinking about the cultural norms too, that his, you know, he would have been referencing potentially as an author.
Yeah, I think like especially during the time period it was set, like in our age, there's still rules, we're all aware of them, but like there are a lot more rule breakers that are in the public eye. In the 80s, that wasn't as much of a cultural presence.
Yes. True. Because it is a book about adolescence, because it's a book about growing up in a sense, to grow up is to kind of find out what the rules are and where you fit into those rules, and what rules are useful and what rules are useless. So that's how I kind of see it. And I think throughout the book, we see exactly that, how rules are broken and how they're kept and at what price. So that's the dedication of the book, right? You turn the very next page and the author asks us a series of questions. Now I'm gonna go ahead and try to share my screen. If this is a disaster, I apologize in advance. But we're just gonna press this button and see if
Yes.
Are you seeing words?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are.
Nice. Okay. I'm going to lay this doozy on you. I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'm going to ask you, what is this all about? So here we go. This is before you read the very first sentence of the book. Why do we smile? Why do we laugh? Why do we feel alone? Why are we sad and confused? Why do we read poetry? Why do we cry when we see a painting? Why is there a riot in the heart when we love? Why do we shame? What is that thing in the pit of your stomach called desire? Now, when I first cracked open this book, I was like, you're asking me a lot of questions right now. What do you think is the author's goal of asking us all these questions before we ever embark on the journey of this book? Why is he asking us this?
For me, I thought about it almost as like asking the question, like, what is the meaning of life? Right? Like that's what all of those questions mean to me. Like, why are we here and what are we doing? And it ultimately all comes down to maybe not necessarily love, but the shared human experience.
Yes.
I think that Ari's, well, and Dante, both of them are like navigating these different things and kind of figuring out where they fit in the world and the world that they create. Like they realize like the world is something you create.
Oh.
Right. And I mean, it is a like coming of age story, right? So like, I don't know, when I read it, it like puts me as a reader in the headspace of like, I don't know any of these things, which is like a lot of the like teenage experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, like, for me, it gets me in the same mindset as our like protagonists.
I never considered it that way, because these characters are all discovering the secrets of the universe. These questions are kind of like, what are the secrets of the universe? Why do we do these things? I had not considered it that way, Ellie.
Yeah, I had thought of it that way too. Also, especially after reading the book, because I think there's so much, especially in Ari's head, and he is just his level of angst and you know, he's got so many feelings and so many repressed feelings. So I kind of thought like, oh, they want to put us in that headspace so that we can empathize a little bit with him.
And what was y'all's experience kind of going back to that 15-year-old level of angst? How did you relate with it? Did you find it frustrating? What was it kind of going back? Because I think that's one of the best things that the book does, is that it transports you back to that 15-year-old headspace. What was your experience with reading about that? And yeah.
May I speak?
Of course.
Just that I listened to this book. I think Marissa did too, and the reader did you too. And I don't know what your experience was, Elizabeth, but if it was the same reader, but it was an older male, and it was the beginning very like jarring and disorienting to hear this voice actor. So I had to sort of reinterpret the voice. Like I would hear it and then I would rethink about how they would really say it to me, Yeah. So that was kind of, I had to get past that, and I did. The other thing was some of the way the man read it, then it was like, this is stupid. I mean, it just sounded really weird when this is stupid. And, some of the banter just was incongruous. So.
Yeah. Sure. I can imagine that reading the angst is a totally different experience than hearing the angst. But Marissa.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree with Beth that the narrator was not good.
That's such a shame.
Yeah, and well, because especially listening to like an older man reading this angsty stuff, it almost felt like somebody reading their diary from when they were a kid. Like it did throw me off a little bit. But yeah, part of it too, just reading all the angst, like I know that I was an angsty teen. It also was like a little cringy and hurt to read because I was like, this is so annoying, but I know that I was also like this. So I had to like find some new love for 15-year-old Marissa.
Yeah.
I listened to a version that was narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Is that not
the one I listened to? Yeah, I was gonna say,
and I thought he did a good job.
It was good. Yeah, definitely. Whatever version you listen to sounds like it would have been really weird, but Lin-Manuel Miranda was really good and gave characters different voices and personalities and stuff. So
I know. I had already read it earlier when it came out and then listened to the Lin-Manuel Miranda audiobook version more recently. And I knew the second he started talking, I was like, I am ready for this emotional journey.
Well, if you came to Lin-Manuel Miranda through Hamilton, I think you're primed for the angst, because Hamilton fundamentally was an angsty character throughout that musical, right? So it felt like it felt consistent with what you had heard from this particular voice before.
Yeah.
I think I was talking with you, Katie, and you had made mention that the angst made you feel frustrated.
I don't think it was me, honestly.
I think it might have been me the other night. I think I said that the other night. Like,
yes.
After a point, I was just like, okay, like, I think it was making me feel very anxious. And so I just was like, you're so in his head, and
yep.
For me,
that's obviously successful, right? It's just,
yes, it's successful in the way that you, as much as Ari feels frustrated by his angst, which he undeniably does, I feel frustrated too. And I was like, oh, that was a good author trick. You tricked me into feeling something cool, into empathizing in this really unique way. And I think that's what this book does. That's where this book is most successful, right? It almost forces you to empathize with these characters' experiences. Did anybody, what's something unexpected or something that you learned from this book that you stumbled across and you went, oh, I might understand that a little bit better now, or oh, maybe I don't understand that thing I thought I understood as well as I do. Did anybody have one of those kind of exclamation points coming over your head type experiences while reading this book?
I kind of only toward the end, sorry, but
do not be sorry.
Okay, just I talk a lot too. The surprising part for me, not specifically the way you were presenting the question, but the way the moms wasn't communicative, and it really, like, a lot of the family dynamic was more about the mom and not the dad, where I just thought that was revealing. And also some of the family, the coming out with the fact that there was an aunt that, they had kept away from the family, or wasn't, the way they touched on the aunt's life and her experience. And then what was the other? I was kind of surprised. I was thinking that there would be more revelation about the brother. There was so much centered in Ari's head about his brother. So the way it was revealed, I think I expected a little more, but I think it was good because it wasn't going to be a pretty little bow either. Like, I was kind of half expecting, like, oh, they're going to meet, and yeah. Know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Beth, what you said reminded me of another question that's been kind of weighing on my heart. So if you had an answer to the previous question, please say it. But I also wanted to raise this point. Silence. This book is kind of about silence in a way. Where do you see silence kind of existing and functioning throughout this book, and for what purpose? Except for right now.
I mean, I think a lot of ways, but I guess for me, it's probably the biggest function of silence would just be to maintain control, I guess, because Ari's mom became very unwell after everything happened with the brother, so they don't talk about the brother. And then you see the same thing, even though Ari doesn't know that reasoning, you see that he does the same thing in his own way. He makes his own rules, with the car incident. He's like, we don't talk about that, because that brings up too much something inside of him. So he's like, nope, we're not going to talk about it. Sweep that under the rug. Save it for a different day. So I guess, and the only way that I can phrase it is like a sense of control through silence. But that's my take.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for your take. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something, Jacob? But I thought it was interesting because I think the silence also really contributes to Ari's loneliness, you know, and it's like, I think he feels lonely in his own family because there's these things they're keeping from him, and his sisters are so much older. And then for him to turn around and put up these barricades and these rules, I mean, it's totally in character, but it just made me sad because it's like you're just continuing to build this lonely bubble. So I think silence sort of contributed to that.
It also seemed pretty representative just of masculinity as a concept. I mean, obviously these are two teen boys and they develop a relationship where they are able to like speak about most things, which I think Allie's right. Like I also had a very similar read of like, it's a way of controlling your own emotions to kind of like not deal with them. But I think it's also just such a big part of how we frame masculinity. And then like, you know, the silent father coming home from war and not wanting to engage, the silent brother who wouldn't answer letters. Like it just seemed also like super emblematic of just masculinity and how we condition boys in particular to just like not talk about feelings or anything really.
I think another thing with Ari is that he wasn't necessarily silent. Like he's having all these thoughts and he wants to communicate them to people, but a lot of the time he's like, I'm not going to write a letter. I'm just going to write in my journal. And so he writes to himself. And so like he's building up this world where he is super isolated and like can't talk about his feelings. And he does talk about how that is like his family's way of coping with things. And that's where he gets this from. But yeah, I think it's like a broader cultural thing too, like Marissa said, with masculinity.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say like a sort of familial pattern as well. So like when that is modeled to you, that produces that in you as well. And he turns inward like he sees his parents do and writes in his journal. And I think a lot of that was also symbolically shown, like when he doesn't read the sketchbook or when he doesn't open the sketchbook for a while, like he's sort of like silencing Dante by doing that.
Yeah, good point.
I always like to say that my family has emotional object impermanence, where it's like, if I don't look at it, then it just doesn't exist. And I think that's very much what's in the sketchbook is like, well, if I don't look at it, then it's not even there. And I think that's also a source of Ari's angst. He's not able to see certain parts of himself. He doesn't want to see certain parts of himself. So because he has that want, then they're just not there. And I think that, well, they sure are just there. And having to come to terms with that can be a struggle.
You guys are making me wonder about like, where are the overlaps between the ideas of silence versus omission? Because I feel like those can be two different things, right? Like the silence around the brother, that was an omission, that was deliberate. And what they tried to do was build a place where what they tried to do was protect Ari by like building this place where he did not have to deal with that thing. And that's like a deliberate omission as opposed to like a silence. And then the other thing that's making me think about is where is the border between silence and privacy, right? Because there are some things that we think are that we can't talk about, and there are some things that we think are private, right? And we all have a right to privacy, right? And we all have to decide where that is and how to maintain those lines. And I think that we saw that a little bit sometimes with Ari. He's like, I am not mad that Dante thought that. I am mad that he said it. I'm not mad that he said it to me, right? And like, there's this idea about like what's private, what's personal, what belongs to yourself versus what you want to share, right? And some things you want to share and cannot, and other things you do not want to share because they're yours and they're yours alone to have, right? Or they're yours to decide who shares in that with you.
Whew. When you said border, that reminded me of the setting of this book. And I would like to hear, I want to know what you guys think about this. So the book takes place in the year 1987. That's about what? That's 7 years into the Reagan administration. That's about 7 years into the AIDS crisis, give or take, in El Paso, Texas, which sits on the Rio Grande,
whatever.
I don't know how to say it, but you know what I'm talking about. Which acts as the border between the U.S. and Mexico. What do you think the author was doing when he set that story there?
I feel like there's a lot of discussion between Ari and Dante about being a real Mexican and what that means to them. So I think that that physical border being the setting kind of alludes to that, the way they feel about their heritage and their current setting and their own masculinity and all the feelings that they're having that kind of don't seem congruous with their backgrounds.
Yeah. What do you think Dante was saying when he said, and he says it maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the book, I'm just not Mexican enough. I'm just not Mexican like that. What do you think that's all about?
I think it was, the culturally, the way like some of the Mexican boys have, say like their cars, like the way he cholos and the way he would describe the culture there, that Dante didn't feel like he was the same. And I think Ari had mentioned too, like being surprised to hear that, the jobs that Dante's parents had. And, there was a professor, and that was unusual for being Mexican. So I don't know if I answered your question, but what was the question?
And you don't feel like you got to answer questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything that you say, I'm just glad to, not to be a cornball, but I'm just glad to be here. So if my question leads you somewhere else, go there too,
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about those jokes. I was kind of reading them. Well, the first joke, I was like, who's the author again? Because it's obviously like a white narrator, so I had to like double check, and I was like, okay.
Ooh. Okay.
But then, yeah, I mean, also because of the time and place in the 80s, like the Chicano movement was more like, I think 70s-ish. Mm-hmm. So there's already been kind of like a more national conversation about like, what is Mexican American identity? They're 2 young boys trying to figure out their own identities, growing up in the States, probably feeling like absorbing a lot of white culture, but also being Mexican. I'm sure I kind of interpreted it as like playful ways of exploring their own identities with each other in kind of a safe environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you said reminded me of this dream that Ari has, right? And he's standing on one side of the river, and on the other side for a second he sees Dante, and then he looks back and he sees his brother. And that dream makes me think about the role that water plays in this book. What are some times that we see water? The river, of course. Where else do we see water?
Raining on the day that there's the accident, and then he is continually dreaming about rain, and when it's raining he gets sad and is reminded of the accident.
They met at the pool.
In the pool.
They meet through swim lessons. Yeah.
They met at the pool.
Yeah, and when they like danced in the rain in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say who I thought I was having this conversation with, because I got in trouble last time I did that. But like, water is a source of comfort, right? It's where they go to hang out. It's where they met. It's when it rains, they feel cool. Like they feel like they're able to be more of themselves. They're able to be more of themselves with one another. But also, water will swallow you up. You can get caught in the undercurrents. You can get sucked away. And sometimes water separates you. You're looking at the person you want to be. You're looking at the family you want to see from across this river. not to be complete middle school teacher, but it's just like, water means a lot in this book, and I think it's really interesting. Is that a shared feeling or not?
There's something interesting about the way that you just said that, right? When you described water as a place of comfort. Full disclosure, I cannot swim. So when you said that, I was like, water's a place of comfort. If you cannot swim, that is like, water is death. It could be, right? But then like you said that like that, and I had not thought about it particularly in that way, but literally Dante teaches Ari how to swim, right?
Yes.
Like and then even though Dante was the one who knew how to swim, like he still was like kind of taken under by various currents in this book that were outside of his control, right? So like the way, so Mr. English teacher, you set it up in a way that that sort of brought these things out differently to me.
And I think we have really kind of talked a lot about Ari, right? What did you guys make of the character of Dante? And to be more specific with my questioning, why can Dante be Dante, and why does Ari have to be Ari? Does that question make any sense when I say it that way? Okay.
You mean like why were the characters created in that way?
Or Dante is somebody who gets to, you know, he reads his poetry books and he sketches and he's, you know, he's got a little spice to his personality. He, you know, he gets to be who Dante is. Ari doesn't have that same experience. He sometimes thinks he's got to do masculinity stuff. He sometimes thinks, you know, what is the main difference between them that makes one way and the other the other?
I think a big part of it is their parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, Dante's parents, like, Ari even like mentions at one point, like, they hug each other and like kiss each other. Like, you're not supposed to do that. My dad never does that with me. Wait, he talks to his dad? Crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the main factor of how each of these individuals are the way that they are. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that like Dante, I saw Dante as such an open person, you know, in that like he just seemed ready to receive experiences as they came to him and like approach people. And that doesn't necessarily, I mean, and yeah, Ari was kind of close. And so I do think like Ellie's saying that would really come from the environment that you're living in, whether you see what you see reflected to you.
See, I think that they were both like, in some ways, I think they were both, I think they both fought gender stuff, but I think that they did it differently, right? Like, I think that one way that, I think that Ari was like Ari was utterly disgusted when when the guy was like, you know, a woman's like a tree and I want to take all these things. Mm-hmm. Like he chose not to participate, right? Many people would choose absolutely to participate, right? Like I think there's more overlap between who they are than it appears in, from the contrast that the author has set up, right? Like there are certain ways where, you know, where Dante is super like is expressive, but there are ways that Ari is expressive that are just different, yes. Right? Like there were times I felt like, okay, but Ari's the open one right now in this moment, and Dante is not. Like I feel like there was a fluidity there between who was like taking that role, that vulnerability, I guess. Like I feel like both boys showed tremendous vulnerability during this book.
Absolutely. And I think when you say vulnerability, that ties to really why this book was selected for this reason is because it forces you to kind of consider vulnerability, what purpose it has, and how a reader can empathize with vulnerable characters. I part of why I love to read is because reading is at its core empathy practice.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck are these people like? I might not understand this whole situation, but I'm gonna read this book and figure it out. And hopefully at the end, I'll know a little bit more about why people are people, why people do the things that they do. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I was like, let's read this book as a community. Did you find that as you read this book, you were experiencing empathy? Did you find, did you see these characters as vulnerable as maybe I did? What do you guys think about all that?
Oh yeah, my heart kind of ached for Ari, and just like his loneliness and his lack of self-esteem, and that's what I was thinking. And Dante just seemed like he was also vulnerable because he was so open and putting himself out there. And but yeah, I felt like the times where Ari was walking down the street and he just felt like he would say he didn't feel like he was normal, or he didn't feel like he belonged, or anyway, that's how I felt sorry for him, but like in a loving way. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I know I said earlier, like I was so frustrated with his angst, and it definitely did get me ramped up. And that's, I listened to it when Lin-Manuel read it. I went back and I looked over the actual physical book and was rereading parts of it before this discussion. And was really struck me how deeply, deeply depressed Ari is through so much of this book. He just like my 15th birthday was horrible. My 14th birthday was horrible. My 13th birthday was horrible. My 12th, it's like, everything he says is just like, I felt like the saddest person ever. And that just made me, like you're saying, that made me feel deeply sad also, just to think, like, to live with that anger that he has and that depression, that's just really, that's unbearable. And I really noticed that in a rereading of it.
And I don't know how much I want to spoil. If somebody's watching this, they must have read at least some of the book, right? So I can do like a light spoiler. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So what did you think in that moment when Dante got hit by the car and Ari had been a hero, which is something he does not want to be? How did you react to that as a reader? Because I've read this book 3 times for 3 different purposes. The first time I read this book, I about threw it across the room. And I was like, get this. I'm eager to hear how you guys reacted to that moment.
So, again, with hearing it, and I think I might have rewound that part. Yeah. But,
because it happens in about 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really quick, and I don't know, it surprised me. I was really afraid something was going to happen to Dante.
Yeah.
Yeah. Worse.
Why do you think Ari doesn't want to be a hero?
I feel like he just wants to be invisible. Like he's lonely, but he doesn't want people to notice him or like know anything about him at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like a pretty big theme throughout the novel, is like, as much as you want to resist being seen, like people will see you. And sometimes when you're seen, it'll be by someone like Dante, and you like can't help but be seen by them and love it eventually. Even though at first you're like, I don't want to be seen, but you really do.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You just put words to it. So yes.
So like you enter the role into like a hero, you then lose the ability to know whether or not somebody is seeing you for yourself. whether they see you as like the individual who you are, or whether they see you as a person who provided this heroic act. So then how can you trust your relationships with people if you don't know whether it's about you or whether it's about the thing, right? And so that's another layer there, I think.
I think he says that too, like when Dante's family moves back from Chicago and they're so happy to see him, and he's like, well, I just don't know if it's because they really want to see me or they just love me because I saved Dante. And that was like really hard for him to get past, because everyone sees him in this way and he doesn't know if it's because of him or because of the thing he did.
Right. It also makes sense.
Also,
go ahead,
Marissa. Oh no. I was gonna say, it's kind of not off topic, just a little branch, but I think it's interesting that he just going off what Elizabeth said, that he differentiates the two. Like he, like in his mind, isn't the one who saved Dante, right? Like he's like, oh, do they just love me because I saved their son, or do they love me for me? As if those aren't the same people.
Yes.
Right.
Ooh.
But then we see that, but he also was very much like, oh my God, I didn't do this, it just happened. But then later in the book, he absolutely was upset, rightfully so, of course, when the other guy, I can't remember his name, because like who wants to remember that kid's name, who left who left after, he was livid. He was
Daniel.
Like, not what you do. That is not what you do. And he knew by that point in the book, like I never would have left him there, which is a thing that like we don't know whether or not he ever reconciles those two pieces of himself. But on one part he's like, but I didn't do it, it just happened. And on the other side he's like, well, this is what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take care of this matter for my friend.
That particular moment that Sherlani you had just brought up, that was one of the most difficult parts for me to read. And I think it was difficult for me to read because there was a small part of me that felt vindicated. I felt, yep, you go ahead and bust some heads. And then I had this shocking realization that for Ari's parents, that's almost that is not exactly the crime that the brother had committed. But I could only imagine what it would be like to find out that your one son who is imprisoned and your other son is also exhibiting violent behavior. But at any rate.
I think that moment was where I sort of empathized with Ari's mom a lot. That flipped me into her shoes, right? Because I was just like, okay, so what happens when your younger son just did almost exactly the same thing that your older son who's in prison did? And now this is a pattern that has to be stopped. Really, really scary, and just
so hard to protect younger son the story and from what really happened.
Yeah, and it didn't work. So you tried all of these years to protect your son in hopes that he will follow a different path, and everything that you've been trying to avoid just happened. That gives me that feeling in my stomach, that sick feeling for her.
Yes. As I mentioned before, I've read this book a number of times. This reading, I found my heart kind of most, my heart was most active, if you will, when reading things that have to deal with the parents. Something that I was eager to kind of hear from you guys is, for a lot of parents in this world, it is not easy to accept your child's queer identity, whatever it might be. That's not the experience that Dante and Ari have in this book, at least from their parents. Why do you think it was so easy for those two sets of parents to accept their children the way that they are? What's going on there?
I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. We know what the parents did. We don't know what the parents felt. We know the choices that the children made in terms of being parents to their children. We don't actually know whether or not any of that was difficult for the parents or not.
Sure.
We just know that they chose to step up and be there for their children. You know, like they could have been hella conflicted. We will never do that because the author did not tell us that. But what the author did show us were the actions that you're referring to.
Yes. And it's, ooh, I wonder why I filled in those blanks the way that I did. What is it about my experience or my experience reading this book that I had not considered what you had just said? But yes, thoughts, feelings, what do y'all think?
Well,
I mean,
this isn't, oh, go ahead, Ellie. No, because I'm going to say something unrelated.
I don't really know. I don't have any articulate thoughts.
Me either.
Especially with Dante's parents. I feel like for Ari's parents, they have their experience with the aunt who is estranged from the family, and I believe in the book they voiced displeasure that she was estranged from the family. So I assume part of it is to they already have another family member who is also estranged because the son, Ari's brother, is in prison, right? And I think that part of it is they don't care, they just want their family to remain their family. They just want to be together, they love him as he is because he is their son, right? That's how I perceived it from Ari. Like I said, I don't know about Dante, but go ahead,
Lucy. What were you?
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, it was when I was thinking about the parents, and they were very supportive. And one thing that popped in my head, and maybe this is because I'm would have been the exact same age as Ari and Dante, and it seemed to me that there was an omission. I was surprised that AIDS was never mentioned in this book, because I have to say, 1988, the Surgeon General sent to every family in America a pamphlet about AIDS, and Ari's father's a mailman, right? So it's kind of like what you're saying too, Shirley. We don't know all what's been going on in their heads and what their concerns and what their worries are, and we just know what they say and how they act. But I guess with the parents, I thought that's where that piece felt like it was missing to me. And I don't know if anyone else noticed that or thought about that at all. But it's just he specifically sets it in this time period. So, and maybe he intentionally left it out as a sort of what if we imagined the 80s without that,
Sure.
So I just struck me, and I did think about it when I was thinking about the parent support, and because that would have been a place where maybe it would have come up.
Yes, when reading this, the word 1987, my brain, all the alarms go off, and it goes, this was smack dab in the heart of people dying from AIDS in America across the world. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that, I was talking about those exclamation points over my brain. That was definitely one of those moments reading the word 1987 and my exclamation points went up. Something about this book, which I think makes it magical, is the language the author uses. It's pretty straightforward, simple stuff. This happened and then this happened. People are talking. He rarely says, Dante said, Ari said. It's just a stream of dialogue. It's just a stream of narration. Did you guys dig that? What did you think about the language the author used to tell this particular story?
It seemed indicative of what an adolescent. I mean, a lot of the dialogue sounded like the way kids would talk, with a lot of times not a lot of information in the sentence, this is stupid,
Oh no, it's frozen. It is frozen. Are we all frozen?
I'm
okay.
I'm not.
Oh,
okay. You were frozen for a second, so rewind a couple seconds and keep going.
Oh, me?
Yep.
Oh, let's see. What did I say? Yeah, I was talking about, yeah, that it was typical of adolescent speak. Also, what I found, I was interested, or I liked hearing how Ari bantered with the girls in his class too, and they, you know, they were kind of teasing him and stuff, and he seemed like he was chilling out a little more, and so it really did, just again from listening and reinterpreting what I was hearing, it sounded like kind of normal the way kids talk. Yeah.
I have a thought, and this might be me like reading far too into anything.
Let us have it.
If I'm anything, I'm a person that, you know, overanalyzes things.
Yeah, good.
So when I was talking about this book, someone had mentioned something of like that like this book got heat because they like the characters never say like I'm gay, or the word gay is never brought up. And your question just made me think of that, in that like the text itself is very simple. It doesn't say he said or any of that. It's just there. Like you can exist in this realm without being like explicitly writing it down. Or does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not even sure if what I'm saying is like making a coherent thought, but like,
welcome to my everyday life.
You don't need that exact text or that exact phrase to be able to exist and have your experience or be this book, I guess.
Are you, so can I sort of try to reinterpret? Are you, so like as far as whether or not Ari's gay, okay? That, so it didn't come out and explicitly, and as I was finishing the book, I was like, so where does this leave him? And I was happy to hear that that's kind of how other folks, I mean, there isn't really you don't walk away with an answer, and they're so young too, that I guess not putting it out there explicitly could for some readers trying to figure things out, you know, recognize that it doesn't, you don't have to be explicitly this thing, like you said, Ellie. Doesn't have to.
Right, and that fits into the theme of like, you know, Dante not feeling like he's Mexican enough, or like, you know, and I'm not even sure if the author like did it on purpose. Like I said, your question just made me like have all of these thoughts, you know. Yes. So like you don't need that exact labeling or that exact wording to be able to do the thing, you know. I don't know. That's what I got.
That makes me wonder. And that's what I got. What you said made me think, you know, the simplistic, I don't want to say simplistic language because that doesn't feel right. But you know what I'm trying to say? Simplistic, I think, is a word with a negative connotation. And that's not what I'm trying to do. But like, because of simplistic language, because of this lack of labels, it made me as the reader go, well, that's just the way things are. You know, that's just the way it is. And as complicated as that might be, it's also really quite simple and really quite straightforward. That's just the way it is. I am dying to know, what did you?
Oh no, you froze. You froze. We don't know what you're dying to know.
What I'm dying to know. Just kidding, I'm not frozen this time. What I'm dying to know is what you guys made of the ending. Were you happy? Were you sad? Were you mad? Were you glad? If I can say anything, I felt like it was an abrupt ending. An abrupt ending that made me smile. What did you think?
I was just curious to know more of the story. That's how I feel a lot of times when I get done with books like this. So I was just like, okay, and what happens next? So I was pretty happy to hear that there is a book 2.
Yeah.
So I am just like thrilled and excited to see what happens next. Because that's how I felt. I was like, okay, where is this going? Like, are they gonna stay together? Are they better off as friends? Like, what's next for Ari and Dante? So I'm excited to read the next book.
I loved the ending. I often play the like game whenever I read a book or whatever that like ends in a place where it's like, oh, but I want more, or like, oh, but I like, oh, but wait, these questions, or like I have to constantly remind myself, like, okay, the author did this on purpose, and there was a team of editors that did this on purpose, like, so I appreciated the abrupt ending because it makes you focus more on both boys' journey there rather than the destination. Does that make sense? Not to be like that cliche, like it's not about the destination, it's about the friends you make along the way or whatever.
It's about the road.
Like So I appreciated the ending in that way, I guess.
I might just be jaded from too much LGBTQ fiction. I was just happy they were both alive at the end of the book. Honestly. It's like, I know Jacob picked this specifically for Big Gay Read, so there's going to be a hate crime, I assume. Somebody's going to die. There
was a hate crime. We got a hate crime thrown in there.
Like, yep, check. So they ended up alive, so that was good.
Yeah, I definitely kept thinking after the initial accident that like something else was going to happen, because the Dante's mom was so worried about him being in the truck with Ari, and I was like, something bad is going to happen. So I'm glad that it ended on a good note, and like, yeah, also we'll read book 2 just to continue the journey.
It's funny that you said that, because I had like a feeling of dread, but I was looking at it through a racial lens. It's like there are two, like, because we know it's like in this border town, we got these 2 brown guys hanging around. You know, we got the one set of parents. It's like, I don't want you going too far. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh no. And then we know that people are often like falsely, you know, incarcerated and things like that. And so I had a similar, like I had like the parallel threat, sense of dread, I guess. Like, oh, what is gonna happen to these 2 brown boys out here?
Yeah. Same. I had that same dread when they go off into the desert alone. I was like, 2 brown boys in a really nice car alone in the desert.
Sharing a joint.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it's about to. What does it say? And this is a rhetorical question. What does it say about the world that when we read books about young men of color, when we read books about young queer people, our brains tell us this is going to be a tragedy?
I think it says a couple of things. I think it depends on where your point of view is, right? Because like on one side, like if you think that like people of color and queer people are trouble, you expect that to be there because you think that that's what they do, right? And if you think that societal forces mean that something bad, like I think it's just 2 sides of the same coin in some ways. But I think that feeling speaks, is a mirror to what we see in our society, I guess.
So now would be the time in which I speak to all my middle thumbers, my down thumbers. What's your middle thumb about? What's your down thumb about? Tell us about it.
Is it literally just me?
I have a sideways.
No, I saw sideways thumbs, okay. And it's okay to have sideways thumbs. You gotta talk to me about it.
I guess I didn't love the language. It was just very like, you know, we talked and we laughed, and then we talked and we laughed, and I was like, that doesn't intrigue me as a reader. Part of it was just cringing so hard at the angst and the teenness.
Oh no, not cringe.
So cringe. What else did I not like? So also one of my first reactions too, I had just finished it and I was like, Jacob, is Ari even gay? Like, what is this book that we just read?
Okay, that person might not be gay, but that person is LGBTQIA+.
Oh yeah, certainly. And it was, I think maybe that's my own, I put this in a box of saying this is a gay story. And then I was mad that he was being put in a gay box. And then I think that maybe that was just me putting him in a box myself, that I didn't even want him in a box, but
layers.
Yeah, because it's obvious that he loves Dante, that they are, they have a connection, right? But it seems like he hasn't completely ruled out other people. And in a lot of ways, the whole book, I felt like him to be more asexual. Like, does he have any desire for anyone?
I feel like that's a valid
yeah.
thing
Yeah,
too.
I thought so too. That's why I was kind of not sure which way it was going, and like throughout, I was waiting for some kind of reveal, I guess.
Yes, and then kind of get like shoehorned together. I guess I was like, but I don't know. Obviously, they have a connection, but does it have to be like a sexual relationship where that they're two gay men together? Like, it just felt like.
But they're 15, and everything's a sexual connection when you're 15.
they're like practicing smooching and running around naked in a desert. But no, Marissa, I hear what you're saying, and I'm glad that you had said it, because I think it's an interesting kind of perception, and I can see why you felt that way. So yes, I'm looking at the clock. It's currently 2:58. What I would like to do, this doesn't matter because they're going to watch this as recorded. They're not watching it at 2:58. At any rate, what I would like to maybe end this discussion on is I'd like to hear from some of you. Where would you like to see their story go? Because as we know, the sequel is coming. What do you want for these characters?
This is gonna sound really cheesy.
Cheese it up. I'm the cheesiest person on the planet. Cheese it up.
But for Ari, well, and actually for both of them, I just want them to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
Wherever they end up, right?
Yep.
Like, because Dante didn't feel like he was Mexican enough. He felt like he didn't belong, like, culturally, and like in other ways too. But that was like the primary one that was like repeatedly said. And then like Ari just also, like we've already talked about, he had this like huge sense of isolation, and I just want them both to feel like they belong wherever they are.
I think it would be nice if they had like a like they stayed together and they have this teen romance with all that means. So that's like all the feelings of being 15, because I just think you learn later to kind of control that more. So it doesn't have to be a love for the ages. It doesn't mean that they're going to be together forever, but just for them to have those strong feelings together, I think would be kind of nice.
Yeah. There's a funny small part of me that I would really love Ari to grow up and to be a teacher like his mother. I think that he looked up to his mother in so many ways, and I think that he's learning so much about himself by how his mother loves him and how she reacts to things, whether for good or for bad. And I'm like, you know what? I think Ari, maybe, I don't know how it all unfurl, but it'd be really cool if you were a teacher like your mom. I don't know why I felt that way, but I did. So yeah.
I like it.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for putting the time into reading this book, thinking about this book in the way that I just spent an hour forcing you into thinking about this book. And I'm just very glad that you came here to share your thoughts and feelings about the book in such a way. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions and for making us think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you're very welcome. I'm glad to do it. Okay, well, thank you so much again. And I think that this is where, you know, how does one make this end? This ends now.
Goodbye.
Right?